Thank you. Again, welcome everyone to today's webinar on dairy co-packing. And many of you may remember a webinar from a few years back that introduced and explored the concept of co-packing. And we're thrilled that there is a new grant opportunity offered through the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center to allow interested farmers and processors to venture into this diversification opportunity. We're hosting today's session to go over this grant opportunity and revisit some of the information that we explored in a previous webinar, as we thought it may be helpful for farmers here who are seriously considering this opportunity. So today we're going to hear from the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center Grants Coordinator, Ali Bouchever, about this grant opportunity and how to apply. There will be plenty of time for questions throughout this presentation. After Ali's section, and then at the conclusion of our session today, we're going to have Q&A. And as a reminder, you can use the raise hand feature to ask a question or place your question in the chat. After that, we're going to hear from Jessica Edwards and Sheila Phelan, our MDAR dairy inspectors, who many of you know and work with. I will then give a quick overview of resources we have related to working with your cooperative and within the federal milk marketing order when co-packing. And then we will have a longer question and answer period where you can share any information you have in the chat as well. I also want to note that the following MDAR staff, in addition to Jessica and Sheila, helped to support this effort. Melissa Adams, manager of our Farm Viability and Agricultural Business Training Programs, is on the call today. Laura Barley, our Farm Viability Planner, is also on the call. Tina Smith, our APR Stewardship Planner for the western part of the state. And Mary Jordan, our Director of Agricultural Markets, could not be on the call but helped support this effort. And also special thanks to CISA for hosting today's webinar for us. And I'm now going to pass it off to Ali, to the Grants Coordinator with Northeast DBIC, to go over this opportunity.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, I'm assuming you can see this now. Hi, my name is Ali Bouchever, and I am the Grants Coordinator for the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center. And I manage this Massachusetts co-packing startup grant, which is brand new, but also our dairy marketing and branding grant, as well as our on-farm milk storage and handling grant just for this year. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, I just want to give you a brief background about what the NE-DBIC does. We are one of 4 regional dairy business innovation initiatives. The Northeast Regional one is based at the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, but we do serve an 11-state region from Maryland up into Maine. And we provide resources to the dairy sector through direct grants, both to dairy businesses, farms and processors, and through our support of dairy business viability and technical assistance resources, as well as through market research. To date, we have received $45.8 million, and at least 50% of those funds go out as grants to dairy businesses and technical service providers who give their direct assistance to dairy businesses. And we provide funding for dairy of all kinds: goat, cow, sheep, farmers, and processors. And we partner pretty extensively with dairy sector stakeholders, either by collaborating with them or directly funding. And that includes state agencies, departments of agriculture, state extension offices, various other stakeholders, farmers, producer associations, etc. And also with viability and business assistance organizations. So let's talk about this particular funding opportunity. It is a 6-month grant program that will provide funds for dairy farmers located in Massachusetts who are forming a new partnership with a processor co-packer, or for licensed Northeast dairy processors who are forming a new partnership with at least one Massachusetts dairy farm, and that is in order to launch a farm-branded value-added product line. Some eligible activities and costs include technical assistance for value-added production, and that looks like things like one-on-one services, trainings, workshops, certifications, agricultural extension services, and TA providers can include business planners, small business development centers, research and academic institutions, and agricultural consultants, among others. Excuse me. And in addition to technical assistance, grant funds can also cover professional marketing and branding services for the newly co-packed products, as well as specialized equipment or supplies at the processing facility that are going to be specific to launching some co-packing processing. And then for a very specific list of allowable costs for specialized equipment, please take a look at our request for applications, which is on our website, and I will direct you to that after this brief presentation, so you can see where exactly to find all this information. And these funds are really intended to support startup operations. And so that is things like tangible implementation rather than research and development, or content and concept development. You should be beyond the initial planning phase and ready to implement your projects. And so with that in mind, ready to go projects and applicants are eligible if they have sought some form of technical assistance to help develop either a co-packing business plan or have completed a business planning workbook that MDAR has created and is referenced throughout the RFA several times. And if it's helpful after this, I can also drop the link for that in our chat. And then logistically speaking, the RFA is out now on our website, and the application period is open until November 16th at 2 p.m. And it is very highly recommended that you do submit your applications a little early, just in case you encounter any technical issues, because the worst thing is, being at 1 p.m. on November 16th and you encounter an issue and aren't able to submit your application. The minimum award amounts are $15,000, and the maximum amount is $35,000. A 25% match commitment is required for the project, which means if you submit a proposal asking for $30,000, you are expected to contribute to the project an additional $7,500, which can cover anything related to the project, including your own time. I know that I already went over some of what the grant funds can cover, including technical assistance, professional marketing and branding, and specialized equipment related to starting co-packing. But funds can also cover costs of production like product testing, scaling, and pilot runs, and also costs associated with professional services, salaries, wages to perform the grant activities, conferences, rental spaces, website and mobile app development, and travel. And because these are federal funds coming from the USDA, there are some specific rules and regulations that we have to follow. So things like construction, including concrete work or foundation work, purchase or lease to own of land, buildings, facilities, purchase of general equipment, which is equipment defined as over $5,000, is not allowed. That would be, for example, like a generator, and then purchase of vehicles or trailers. These things are not allowable costs for grant funds to cover, but they can be covered by your personal match. And if there is something on the RFA under the specialized equipment that you think, you want to propose a piece of equipment that is not on that list, please feel free to reach out. So that way we can talk about your project. We can make sure that you're not going to waste time on doing an application that will not be an eligible cost. And if anything, perhaps we could run it by the USDA and get it pre-approved for you too. So moral of the story is reach out and make sure that what you are applying for is actually an allowable activity. I'm going to go over a couple examples of both eligible and ineligible projects so you get a sense of what that could look like. For example, an eligible project is a farmer who has worked with a TA provider, has identified feta cheese as a viable product for their markets, and the farmer has found a co-packer to produce the feta but needs funding to support packaging and labeling. That would be an eligible project. A second example is a processor who has sought technical assistance, partners with the dairy farm to co-pack their yogurt and other products. The processor purchases the specialized equipment that would be needed to produce the yogurt and works with a marketing professional on a social media campaign. So those are two examples of projects where they're using funds for either specialized equipment, marketing and branding, and technical service. The two ineligible projects and how to make them eligible are, first, a cheesemaker wants to increase their production capacity by adding a second vat pasteurizer to their production space. This project would be eligible if the cheesemaker has received technical assistance and we're adding the second vat pasteurizer in order to handle more milk coming from a newly partnering Massachusetts farm who they have a co-packing agreement with to start the cheese making. Second is a dairy farmer wants to purchase specialized equipment to start processing their own milk to make yogurt. This project, as it is not eligible, but to be eligible, the dairy farmer would have had to have sought technical assistance and partner with a co-packer to produce the farm's yogurt and purchase the specialized equipment for the processing. And then for those of you who either don't have a lot of experience applying to grants or have not applied to a DBIC grant program before, I just want to go over a few pretty basic things, which is, first, please take the time to read the full RFA because it contains all of the information in a roughly 20-page document about the questions that we'll be asking, what makes a competitive project, and the scoring criteria, so you can see exactly how your application will be scored. And importantly, developing a competitive application doesn't have to be very fancy. The most competitive and successful applications are ones that are very clear, that show us what the plan is that is being proposed, and explains clearly how the project will help their business in the long term. They also answer all parts of the questions. Often there's several different pieces to one question, and they include all required documentation. And for this program, what is required is, if you are submitting a proposal to buy specialized equipment, you do need to provide a quote for that equipment, as well as some requirements around letters of commitment and support, which is outlined in the RFA. And then again, please submit ahead of the deadlines that you're leaving time to address any technical things that come up, because it is very sad when you've spent a lot of time coming up with an application, but there's just not enough time to get it in. So again, on the last few pages of the RFA is the scoring criteria, which tells you exactly how your application will be evaluated, and it is very important to go back and review that to make sure that you are meeting those criteria. And last but not least, please reach out to me. You're welcome to talk about your potential project ahead of submitting. Run it by me, see if it seems like an allowable project. It is my job to help you. And with that in mind, this is my contact information. My phone number is on our website, and I would highly recommend signing up for our monthly newsletter, which keeps you in the loop of all things DBIC, upcoming grants, blog posts, etc., and is a great resource for folks. And now I would like to stop sharing this screen and show you where on our website you can find all this information. And can someone just unmute and make sure that you're seeing my home screen for the DBIC webpage?
We can see it. Great.
Perfect. Okay. So this is our website. It's NE-DBIC.com. And up at the top is our toolbar where you can hit grants. You can also go to funding for farmers or funding for processors. And just a quick scroll down at the bottom is our funding calendar. And here are all of our grant programs. The Massachusetts Co-packing Startup Grant Program is right here. And if you go down to the bottom, it says how to apply. And this is where you will access the RFA. And again, as you can see, it's a pretty long document, but it clearly explains what the program is and details about eligibility. And here at the end is the application scoring criteria. And with that, I believe we've hit all the things. So I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was a really great and helpful presentation. Folks, if you have questions, feel free to use the raise hand feature. You can also try unmuting. We're a fairly small group today, so if you're having trouble with the raise hand feature, feel free to try unmuting and we can facilitate the questions that way. And finally, you can put your question in the chat if that's something that you prefer to do. So we'll give it a minute for folks to think of any questions, and then we will move on to transportation. So we have a question from Lucy McCain about other dairy goat farmers on the call. That might be something for folks to just connect with in the chat. Another question came in. With the Farm Viability Grant for 2024, does this time frame work with it? And I don't know, Melissa or Laura, if you would like to tackle that question.
I guess I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, so the farm viability process for fiscal year 24, we would be working with farmers to develop a plan starting now. Funding would be available in the spring. So it's, you would need to apply sooner than that for this particular grant, and have a worksheet or a plan available. So the timing doesn't quite work in terms of the plan, if that's what you're asking, but it's certainly, this could be a project identified. Does that answer your question? The funding, and I'm not sure, maybe Allie, if you could talk a little bit more about when the funding would be available, that might be helpful. The funding available for farm viability would be in the spring of 2024.
Yeah. So the application close date is November 16th. It's usually a few weeks after that we make our award notifications. And from the start of award notifications for 6 months is when the project runs, and we don't have a lot of wiggle room for extending projects. So that, we'd be looking at roughly June or July for ending the project.
Thank you both. I think that answers the question. Appreciate it. Another question came in. If an applicant chooses to submit a business plan instead of using MDAR's workbook, must the business plan cover all the questions in the workbook? Are there any other guidelines for the business plan?
Yeah, thank you for that thoughtful question. So your business plan doesn't have to be, your entire business's operational plan, just the piece about co-packing. And I would say it does not necessarily have to answer all of the questions in the workbook, though if you do, it really shows how much planning and thinking has gone behind your operation, and it will clearly express how much thinking and preparation you've done. So I would say it would help to answer all of them, but it's not necessarily a requirement if it doesn't make sense for your co-packing business plan.
Thank you, Allie. Another question came in. Is there a list of qualified processors, co-packers for dairy farmers? And I can answer this one. We do on our website, and I can put that in the chat, have a map of co-packing facilities in Massachusetts. I just want to point out that this list may not be exhaustive. There may be other dairy co-packers who have not signed on to be on this map. In addition, we do recommend that farmers go through their own process of identifying processors and working with them to make sure that they're going to meet their needs. This is for informational purposes only. So I can put a link to that map in the website in the chat. Another question, do you have a predetermined limit to the number of applicants that you will be able to award for this program?
Yes, that is a good question. So we have total available for this program $130,000, and with the individual award limit being $35,000. If everyone submits $15,000 applications, that'll be roughly 8 or 9 applicants that will award, but it could be fewer than that.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how do we identify co-packing facilities that may be interested in working with us, and what are the expected ones to further interest in and planning? So again, the main resource that we have available is that map of facilities that we'll put in the chat. There may be processors on this call, and there's an opportunity to share your information in the chat. And I hope that answers the question. And feel free to unmute, folks, if you would like to clarify your question a little further. And then another question came in, what is the best way to demonstrate a potential partnership between a facility and a farmer? A legal agreement or a letter of support?
Yeah, great question. That would be a letter of commitment from either of the partnering folks, depending on who the applicant is. And that would explain, the type of relationship you have, your full support of the project, that kind of thing. But a letter of commitment is what you would need to demonstrate that partnership.
I also wanted to mention that the co-packing map has facilities within Massachusetts. And I believe that with this grant, the processing facility does not need to be in Massachusetts. Is that correct, Allie?
That's correct. So just the partnering dairy farmer needs to be in Massachusetts, but the processor could be located anywhere in the Northeast, as long as they are currently processing and able to start co-packing.
And we're going to have our animal health folks on here too, so there may be implications with moving milk between state lines, but I just wanted to clarify that point that's in the RFA. So I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. If anybody else has a question, you can hold on to it, and we will have plenty of time at the end of the session to have a longer Q&A. Thank you, Allie, for a great presentation and for fielding those questions.
Yeah, thank you. And please, again, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Great. And we're now going to move on to animal health, and we're going to talk about small-scale transportation options and hear from Sheila Phelan. I just want to make sure, Sheila, that we can hear you okay if you want to test your audio while I pull up the slides.
I'm right here. I'm sorry, my camera isn't working today, though.
That's okay. Hearing you is the most important part. So I will move to your slides. If you give me 1 second. Okay, I think this is the first one.
All right, so I'm Sheila Phelan. I'm a dairy inspector for Massachusetts. I've been doing it for about 19 years. So we'll go on to the first slide. Maybe. Here we go. To be a co-packing in Massachusetts, you need to have a certificate of registration with MDAR. And you need to have a tank permit. What you're hauling your milk in needs to be certified by the state also. And you have to have a licensed hauler sampler, which would be the person hauling the milk. And each case is handled individually because you guys are all small processors. So the best thing to do is to reach out to the inspector in your area and discuss with them first what you want to do. And then from there on, we can let you know the key points in handling your specific project. Go on to the next one. This is a sample of what you can transport your milk in. It is a sturdy milk can with a umbrella type lid. You can also use totes that are disposable that go inside the plastic containers and transported like that. These are not temperature controlled, is what I'm trying to say. And so, you'd have to put them in like a water vat with ice to keep them cool for your transportation. But these are available, and sometimes they can fit inside of a large garbage can, a plastic one, and these are sealed and very airtight. The next one. This is a preferred sampling transportation tank. It is all contained in one unit. It is temperature controlled, and everything is secured on it. Like the valves have a plate that comes along and covers them, and the tank is locked on the top. And it can be strapped onto the back of a truck with impervious flooring around it, and into a container type truck also. You go into the next one. These are other samples of utility trailers that can be used. The doors need to be sealed tightly and need to have FRP boards around them so they can be cleaned and sanitized. You can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's. And then the floors, if you have a wooden floor or a cement floor in the trailers or whatever they're using, it has to have an impervious base on it also. If you're using the trailer to be directly milked into it, then the trailer has to be approved by the Division of Animal Health, and it's being used as a milk room type where all your doors need to be self-closing, and you'd have to have everything inside of the trailer impervious. Next. These are other samples of trailers that have been conditioned to move milk in, and the different types of containers that are used inside of them. Again, they want to make sure that everything in there can be easily washed and cleaned, and that the tank can be cleaned and it can be drained appropriately. The ones on the far right have hooks where you can hang your hoses, so they also can be drained. You don't want to leave any water or milk in the hoses because that'll just create a bacteria. Next. We do have a few private haulers that are using the previous tanks that you saw, where they are transporting their own milk to a plant, a small plant, to have cheese made or have milk processed or pasteurized. And again, some farmers arrange for transport through their cooperative. Next. Again, the best thing to do is if you have any questions, contact an animal inspector from the state and let them know what you want to do. It's better to talk to us ahead of time than to go ahead and create something that we're going to come in and have you change. If you have any questions, you can call the office or call one of the inspectors and we'd be more than happy to walk you through it, or come out and see what you have. And then we could kind of guide you in the right direction so it doesn't cost you a fortune where you have to create something and then change it later. Next, any questions?
Thank you so much, Sheila. We'll take a look at the chat, give it another minute, and then we'll move on to the next. Okay, we have a question in the chat. Can you give an idea of the scale of the value-added enterprise MDAR expects for these projects? Maybe in terms of revenue or production?
I would have no idea. I'm sorry. You know, that all depends on what you're processing and how much it's costing to have it processed to what you sell. I just don't have an idea. That's not in my scope.
Thank you, Sheila. And I agree. I think it will really depend on the project. And, you know, this is a relatively new concept. So, you know, I think we envision these to be fairly small to start, especially if it's a new venture for the business. But that would really just depend on the individual project and the agreement and the capacity of the processing facility and the farmers' plans.
If they have any questions, the best thing to do is to reach out to one of the animal health inspectors and ask. They said you're better off moving forward than having to go forward and go back in case you make the wrong decisions on, you know, your transportation of what you're using and what you want to use. Just ask ahead of time.
A very, very great point. Any other questions? And again, we're going to have some more time at the end for these as well. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly touch on two other factors to think about when co-packing. And one of them is the Federal Milk Marketing Order, which is a USDA order, a regulatory body that establishes the minimum price that farmers receive for their milk. And federal milk marketing orders operate under a set of rules that impacts how milk moves in the state and how it's processed at different plants. Different plants have different categories or classifications that impacts what type of milk they can receive, and oftentimes that's dictated by the products that are made in that processing plant. So there are two key themes in the Federal Milk Marketing Order regulations that affect co-packing. One is the classification of the plant, and that mainly affects where the supplied milk has to be sourced from and how much is sourced. And then the second factor is the timing of when milk is diverted from being within the order, and this can affect if a farmer would like to come back into the order. So those are the two key things to think about. And I want to add that the information that you see on these slides was vetted by the Federal Milk Marketing Order. We spoke with them a few years back when we initially did this research, and they reviewed our materials so that we were crystal clear on what we were presenting here today. So I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but I just want to emphasize again that there are different classifications of processing facilities. And you do want to be aware that this can impact where the milk is sourced from. And I'm going to get into also the fact that it can be different if you're within a cooperative as well right now. So we have this information available on our website, and we can put the link in the chat. But this is really a summary table of the different types of plants that there are in Massachusetts and what their restrictions are relative to the federal milk marketing order. So some types of plants have fewer restrictions on where the milk can be sourced from than others. As far as cooperatives, many Massachusetts dairies are in cooperatives, and if that's the case for you, you'll want to engage with your field representatives. You know how much milk you plan to divert from your contract, when and how often, and the facility that will co-pack for you. And you'll really want to understand how this arrangement may affect your contract, if at all, and how you could return to a full marketing contract should your venture not be successful. You'd also want to understand how you would leave the cooperative if your venture should require enough of your farm's production to impact your root neighbors or some other factor. Essentially, you want to have an understanding of the effect that your co-packing venture will have on your contract if you're working with a cooperative. And the cooperatives have advised us that the best way to do that is to work through your field representative. And I imagine that you all know who that is, but if you have any questions about that, I would reach out to a contact at your cooperative to figure out who you should be speaking to about this. And this is a very complicated chart that's available on our website, and I'm not going to go through it, but it talks about 2 different types of arrangements that you can have as far as payments for milk, depending on which pathway you go to. And again, we will put these links to these resources in the chat so that you can take a look at them and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Okay, I'm just catching up on the chat. And I also just wanted to reshare Allie's contact information and reiterate that the deadline for this grant opportunity is November 16th. So at this point, we can stop the recording and we're going to enter into a larger Q&A period. And I see folks are already sharing information in the chat, and you can continue to do so.